are we going too far in prizing reason as the only value without enough respect to custom? Because I think that one of the things that may have happened in the latter half of the 20th century is exactly that.
I entirely agree with you that you can go way too far with the reason stuff. I'm sort of a Hayekian in my bones, which also makes me sort of a Burkean in my bones. I think that there is more what the Hayekian types would call embedded knowledge in social customs and norms than we can get our heads around, right? All of the cliches about how, your grandmother was right about everything. Well, your grandmother was right about everything because she inherited this vast amount of trial and error wisdom that had accumulated over centuries or millennia. The problem is that we are raising people now that we're raising generations of people, including among intellectuals, I would say almost particularly among intellectuals, who think that just because they can't see the embedded wisdom and the trial and error that went into some custom or norm, there must not be any in it. Hannah Arendt liked to say, every generation, Western civilization is invaded by barbarians. We call them children, right? And that's basically a big chunk of the argument of the book right there, is this idea that you're not born into some abstraction. You're born into an actual family. And your family is what civilizes you. It's what models good behavior. It's what teaches you right from wrong. It's what teaches you how to use a knife and fork. It teaches you all the little stuff and all of the big stuff. And it works on principles that have nothing to do with the market, right? I mean, I am literally, and I suspect you are too, you're far closer to a communist in your own family, right?
Of course.
Because in your own family, it really is from each according to their ability, each according to their need.
Joint bank account, the whole deal.
Yeah, you don't charge your kids for food yet, right? You don't charge them rent yet. The point is that the values of what Hayek would call the microcosm are not based on contracts and rationality. They're based on deep, powerful notions of solidarity and mutual obligation that are much better expressed and represented by religious concepts, by moral concepts, not by rational concepts. In the microcosm, that's the world of kin, family, friends, where your values of reciprocity trump market notions, right? It's the Gemeinschaft versus the Gesellschaft. And in the macrocosm, that's the world where you deal with strangers. And one of the beautiful things about capitalism is it turns strangers from existential enemies into customers.
Right.
And so you can't take the values of the microcosm and impose them on the macrocosm without destroying liberty. You cannot take the values of the macrocosm and apply them to the microcosm without destroying the values and moral creating engine that is the family and civil society.
So the nationalism versus patriotism debate gets to some of the aspects of tribalism that we've talked about, because there is, I think it's fair to say, good tribalism is in the tribalism of ideas, and then there is bad tribalism as in the tribalism of race or the tribalism of class, things that you can't change about yourself that you are born into. This would be bad tribalism. And tribalism of ideas, where you are part of a group because you identify as part of this group, this would be a tribalism that is less likely to be a problem.
There's this vestigial thing from Marxism that still teaches people that socialism and nationalism are opposites, which is a fight that the Trotskyites lost in the Soviet Union in about 1926. They're not opposites. They're far more often the same thing. Read a speech by Fidel Castro, read a speech by Hugo Chavez, and replace every instance of the word socialist with nationalist, and every instance of the word nationalism with socialism. It doesn't change the meaning of any of the sentences. When you nationalize an industry, you're socializing an industry. Nationalized healthcare is socialized medicine. Now, it's also just worth pointing out that people think that nationalism is this ancient thing. It's also a product of Romanticism. It first comes out more or less in Germany as a response to the imposition, first by the French Revolutionary Army and then by the Napoleonic Army, of the Enlightenment, which was seen as a foreign French import. And so these guys like Johann Fichte and Johann Herder create these mythical notions of German national identity as a response to all of that. And so ethno-nationalism is a fairly modern concept. There have always been countries, but this idea of nationalism is a fairly recent thing, and it is, in its origins, inseparable from ethno-nationalism.
You're a parent, obviously. How do you bring up your kids to appreciate these values?
The important stuff in life is about faith, family, friends, experiences. You should live a life. One of the things I try to impress on her is that, without getting too deep in the weeds about death, but, that at the end of your life, you want a eulogy, not a resume. And that's the stuff that I try to teach her.
Well, Jonah Goldberg, it really is an amazing pleasure to have you on the show. I really
great to be
appreciate you
here.
stopping
Yeah.
by. And everybody should go out and purchase a copy of Suicide of the West or 5 and give them to all your
At least
friends.
one copy.
At least one copy. Don't just borrow it from a friend. Buy it. It's the Suicide of the West. Jonah Goldberg, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.